She discovered she was pregnant the same night she watched the man she loved order an execution. Lena Carter stood frozen in a Chicago parking garage, 6 weeks carrying Dominic Moretti's child, as the gunshot echoed through concrete walls. The charming businessman she thought she knew had just revealed himself as something far darker, a crime lord who killed without hesitation. By sunrise, she would drain her bank account and vanish without a trace, rebuilding her life in rural Tennessee under a false name. But 9 months later, exhausted and bleeding in a small-town hospital, Lena would learn the terrifying truth. Dominic had been watching her the entire time. Stay until the end to see how this story unfolds, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The first time Lena Carter truly saw Dominic Moretti, she was already 6 weeks pregnant with his child. Not the version of him she'd known for 8 months, the one who remembered how she took her coffee, who sent flowers to her classroom on Fridays, who kissed her like she was something precious he'd finally found after years of searching. The real Dominic. The one standing in a dimly lit parking garage at 11:43 on a Thursday night, his Italian leather shoes pristine against oil-stained concrete, calmly instructing 2 men to put a bullet in someone's head. Lena's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, though there was nothing to see yet. Nothing except the positive pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, still hidden in her purse, the secret she'd planned to share over the dinner reservation Dominic had made at that French place on Michigan Avenue. The dinner she'd never make it to. She'd followed him on impulse, concern overriding common sense when he'd received that phone call during their afternoon together and left her apartment with an expression she'd never seen before. Cold, focused, dangerous. She told herself she was being paranoid, that the weird feeling in her gut was just early pregnancy hormones making her anxious. She'd been so catastrophically wrong. Marcus knew the rules, Dominic's voice carried across the garage, smooth and controlled as always, but lacking any trace of the warmth she'd grown addicted to. He broke them. Actions have consequences. The man on his knees, Marcus apparently, was crying, begging. His words echoed off concrete pillars, desperate pleas that made Lena's throat close up. "Please, Dom, please. I've got kids, man. I've got kids." You should have thought about them before you started skimming from the Northwest Territory. Dominic checked his watch. A Patek Philippe she'd admired countless times, usually right before he'd pull her into bed. We're already behind schedule. Lena's vision blurred. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible nightmare, the kind where you wake up gasping and grateful it was only your subconscious playing tricks. But the cold November air biting through her coat was real. The distant sound of traffic from the street above was real. The gun one of Dominic's men pulled from his jacket was horrifyingly, devastatingly real. "Wait," Marcus's voice cracked. "Wait, please." The gunshot was louder than Lena expected, sharper. It punched through the air and seemed to reverberate inside her chest cavity, stopping her heart for one infinite second. Marcus crumpled, and Dominic didn't even flinch. He simply nodded to his men, straightened his cuffs, and turned to leave. Lena stumbled backward, her heels scraping against concrete. The sound was barely audible, but in that moment it might as well have been a scream. Dominic's head snapped in her direction. Their eyes met across 30 feet of underground parking garage, across the chasm of everything she'd believed about him, across the life she'd imagined they might build together. For 3 seconds that stretched into eternity, neither of them moved. Then Lena ran. She didn't remember getting to her car, didn't remember the drive back to her apartment in Lincoln Park, didn't remember anything except the sound of that gunshot and the absolute emptiness in Dominic's eyes as he'd watched a man die. Her hands shook so violently she could barely get her key in the lock. Inside, she locked every deadbolt, drew every curtain, then stood in her darkened living room trying to remember how to breathe. Her phone buzzed. "Dominic, we need to talk." Then again. "Dominic. Lena, please, let me explain." And again. "Dominic, I'm outside your building. Just give me 5 minutes." She looked at the pregnancy test in her purse, at the life growing inside her that was half his, half hers, half everything she'd wanted, and half something she couldn't even name. By sunrise, Lena had made 3 decisions. First, she would never tell Dominic Moretti about this baby. Second, she would disappear so completely that even a man with his resources couldn't find her. Third, She would do whatever it took to protect her child from the world she'd accidentally stumbled into. At 6:15 a.m., she walked into her bank and withdrew every penny from her savings account. $12,000, the result of 5 years of teaching elementary school and living below her means. Not much, but enough for a head start. By 7:30, she had loaded everything essential into her 10-year-old Honda Civic: clothes, documents, her mother's jewelry, the ultrasound appointment card she'd scheduled for next week. The apartment she left behind still held traces of Dominic everywhere. His Columbia sweatshirt in her closet, his toothbrush by her sink, the expensive coffee maker he'd bought because she'd mentioned once that she wished she could make lattes at home. Evidence of a relationship that had never been real. She'd fallen in love with a ghost, a carefully constructed illusion designed to hide a monster. Lena didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye to friends or colleagues, simply vanished into morning traffic like she'd never existed. Behind her, Chicago disappeared into the rearview mirror. Ahead, somewhere in America's vast middle, lay a future she'd have to build from nothing. Bunk. 3 months later, Millbrook, Tennessee. Population, 3,847. The Sunrise Diner smelled like coffee, bacon grease, and the kind of small-town stability Lena had never appreciated until she lost everything else. "Order up, honey," Charlene called from the kitchen window, her Tennessee drawl warm as the biscuits she made from scratch every morning. Lena grabbed the plates, 2 breakfast specials, 1 with extra bacon, and delivered them to the corner booth where the Miller brothers sat every Saturday morning without fail. 70-something farmers who still wore overalls and paid in exact change. "There you go, gentlemen." She smiled, the expression easier now than it had been those first desperate weeks. "Anything else I can get you?" "Just the check when you get a chance, Miss Emma." Emma. Her new name, borrowed from a grandmother she'd barely known. Emma Hartley, transplant from Missouri, quiet and unremarkable and completely invented. The identity had cost $800 from a guy in Memphis who asked no questions and provided excellent work. Social Security card, driver's license, even a thin credit history that would pass casual inspection. Lena, Emma, had stopped thinking of it as illegal. She thought of it as survival. At 14 weeks pregnant now, she could almost hide the curve of her stomach under the diner's generous uniform. Almost. Charlene had noticed, of course, but said nothing except to quietly switch Lena to day shifts and make sure she took breaks. Small-town kindness. The type that asked no questions but offered practical help. Lena had found Millbrook by throwing a dart at a map. Literally. She'd needed somewhere small enough that strangers stood out, but large enough to offer anonymity. Somewhere Dominic would never think to look. The town sat in rural Middle Tennessee, surrounded by rolling hills and horse farms. The kind of place where the most exciting event was the annual 4th of July parade, where newcomers were welcomed with casseroles and nosy but well-meaning questions about where they came from. Lena had kept her story simple. Recent divorce, fresh start, no family to speak of. People had nodded sympathetically and left her mostly alone. Perfect. She'd rented a tiny studio above the hardware store for $400 a month. Charlene had hired her at the diner despite her obvious lack of waitressing experience. A local library had given her internet access to research pregnancy on a budget. For 3 months, she'd rebuilt something resembling a life. And every single day, she waited for Dominic to find her. The bell above the diner door chimed. Lena glanced up automatically, her body still programmed to scan for threats. Just misses. Patterson coming in for her usual tea and pie. Lena released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "You okay, honey?" Charlene appeared beside her, wiping her hands on her apron. "You look like you saw a ghost." "I'm fine." Lena manufactured another smile. "Just tired." Charlene's knowing look suggested she understood more than Lena had ever said. "Your shift ends in 20 minutes. Go put your feet up. Doctor's orders." Lena didn't have a doctor. Couldn't risk the paper trail. But she nodded anyway. Back in her studio that evening, she ate canned soup and crackers while researching midwives who worked off the books. She'd found one possibility, a retired nurse 2 towns over who still helped women in difficult situations, no questions asked. An appointment was scheduled for next week. Lena placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the slight firmness that hadn't been there a month ago. Inside, a tiny human was growing, developing fingers and toes, a beating heart, the genetic legacy of a man she'd loved, and a monster she'd run from. "It's just us," she whispered to the quiet room, "and I promise you'll never know who he is. You'll never be part of that world." Her phone, a cheap burner bought with cash, sat silent on the table. She'd destroyed her old one the day she left Chicago, along with her laptop and tablet. Anything that could be traced or tracked. For 3 months, the silence had held. 3 months of looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, waiting for Dominic's resources and connections to finally track her down. But nothing happened. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe one pregnant ex-girlfriend wasn't worth the effort when you were running a criminal empire. Maybe she'd actually escaped. Lena wanted desperately to believe it. Month 5, March. The baby's measuring perfectly. Susan, the retired nurse midwife, smiled over her reading glasses. "Healthy heartbeat, good growth. You're doing everything right, sweetheart." Lena exhaled relief. These clandestine appointments in Susan's farmhouse, paid in cash, were the only prenatal care she could risk. No hospital records, no insurance claims, no trail. "Boy or girl?" Lena asked, though part of her was afraid to know. Afraid that knowing more details would make this more real, harder to protect. "Girl." Susan's smile widened. "A strong little fighter from the way she's moving around in there." "A daughter." Lena's hand moved to her now obvious belly, feeling the flutter of movement that had started a few weeks ago. A girl who would grow up knowing nothing about her father except whatever story Lena invented. Better a convincing lie than a terrible truth. "Everything looks good," Susan continued, making notes in a handwritten file she kept in a locked cabinet. "But I want to see you back in 2 weeks. And Emma—" She paused, her expression serious. "If anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is." "I will." Driving back to Millbrook, Lena allowed herself a moment of something that might have been hope. She was more than halfway through. If she could just make it to delivery, find somewhere safe to give birth, she could disappear again. Different town, different identity. Keep running until her daughter was old enough that Dominic couldn't claim her even if he found them. The plan was thin, full of holes, dependent on luck. But it was all she had. Back at the diner, life continued its unremarkable rhythm. Breakfast rush, lunch crowd, early dinner service. Lena's feet ached constantly now, and her back protested the long shifts, but she needed every dollar. "Mail came for you." Charlene handed her an envelope during her break. Lena's heart stopped. She didn't get mail, ever. She'd specifically avoided establishing any kind of paper trail. The envelope was plain white, her name, Emma Hartley, written in unfamiliar handwriting. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a receipt, for her studio apartment, marked paid in full for the next 3 months. Lena's hands started shaking. "Who?" She looked up at Charlene. "Did you see who delivered this?" "It was just in the regular mail, honey. Is something wrong?" Everything was wrong. Someone knew where she lived. Someone had paid her rent. Someone was watching. That night, Lena barely slept. She triple-checked her locks, kept her phone within reach, and tried to convince herself this was coincidence. Maybe her landlord had made a mistake. Maybe there was some kind of local charity she didn't know about. Maybe she was still safe. 2 days later, she returned from her shift to find groceries on her doorstep. Healthy food, expensive brands, everything she'd been forcing herself not to buy because of the cost. No note, no explanation. A week after that, the overdue electric bill she'd been panicking about mysteriously vanished from the utility company's system. Paid by an anonymous benefactor, they said. Someone was taking care of her, and there was only one person in the world with the resources and motivation to do something like this. Lena started making plans to run again. Started researching new towns, new identities, calculating how far her remaining money would stretch. But before she could execute any of it, her body made the decision for her. Month 7, May 14th, 2:47 a.m. The pain woke her from restless sleep. Sharp, wrong, too early. Lena stumbled to the bathroom and saw blood. Not spotting, not something that could be ignored or explained away. Real blood. Emergency blood. With shaking hands, she called Susan. "I'm coming to get you," the midwife said immediately, her calm voice the only stable thing in Lena's tilting world. "Don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes." But 20 minutes was too long. The pain intensified, the bleeding got worse, and Lena knew with terrible certainty that something was catastrophically wrong. She called 911. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and terror, EMTs asking questions she could barely answer, bright lights and urgent voices, and the overwhelming fear that she was losing her daughter before they'd ever met. "We need to do an emergency C-section," a doctor was saying, her face swimming above Lena's. "The placenta has abrupted. We need to get the baby out now. It's too early. She's 32 weeks, viable, but every minute counts." Then chaos. Rushing through hallways, harsh lights overhead, someone putting a mask over her face, telling her to count backward. Lena's last conscious thought was a prayer to anyone listening that her daughter would survive. Heck, she woke to beeping machines and fluorescent lights. For a confused moment, she didn't remember where she was or why everything hurt. Then it crashed back. The blood. The ambulance. The emergency surgery. "My baby." Lena tried to sit up, pain screaming through her abdomen. "She's alive." A nurse appeared, gently pressing her back down. 3 pounds, 8 ounces, small but breathing on her own. "She's in the NICU, but the doctors are optimistic." Lena started crying. Relief, terror, exhaustion, all of it pouring out at once. "You saved her life by calling when you did," the nurse continued. "Another hour and we might have lost you both." They let her see her daughter 2 hours later, wheeling Lena's bed into the NICU. The baby was impossibly tiny, surrounded by wires and monitors, but she was breathing, moving, alive. "Have you picked a name?" a different nurse asked gently. Lena stared at her daughter through the plastic incubator, at this tiny person she'd spent 7 months hiding and protecting. "Maya," she whispered. "Her name is Maya." For 3 days, Lena lived in a haze of recovery and cautious hope. Maya was stable, gaining weight. The doctors talked about maybe 6 weeks in the NICU, then they could go home. Lena started making plans. She'd wait until Maya was released, then they'd leave Tennessee entirely. Maybe the Pacific Northwest, somewhere she could truly disappear. On the 4th day, exhausted from another night of waking every 2 hours to pump milk for Maya, Lena dozed in her hospital bed. She woke to the sound of her door opening. At first, she thought it was another nurse. They came and went constantly, checking vitals, bringing medications. Then she saw who was standing in the doorway. Dominic Moretti looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him. Perfectly tailored suit, dark hair styled just so, that handsome face that had made her believe in fairy tales. Except his eyes. His eyes were different. Haunted. Desperate. "Hello, Lena," he said quietly. Her heart stopped. "How—" Her voice came out as a broken whisper. "How did I find you?" He stepped into the room, and she noticed the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "I never lost you. Not for a single day." The words didn't make sense. 7 months. 7 months of hiding and planning and running. "You've been watching me?" "Protecting you." He moved closer to her bed, making sure you were safe, that you had what you needed. The rent, the groceries, the paid bills, all of it, all along. The baby, Lena's hand instinctively moved to her empty stomach. "Maya," Dominic's expression softened. 3 pounds, 8 ounces. Born at 3:47 a.m. on May 14th. Currently stable in the NICU. He knew everything. Not just that she'd been pregnant, but every detail about their daughter. "I want you to leave." Lena's voice shook. "I want you to walk out of here and never come near us again." "I can't do that." "Yes, you can. You can choose to let us go." "Lena." He sat in the chair beside her bed, uninvited. "Do you know what's been happening in Chicago since you left?" She didn't want to know, didn't want any connection to that world. "Vincent Calabrese has been making moves," Dominic continued anyway. "He knows about you. He's known since the week after you disappeared, and the only reason you're still alive is because I made it very clear what would happen to anyone who touched you." Lena's blood went cold. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. A grainy surveillance image of her in the diner parking lot. This was taken 3 months ago by one of Vincent's crew. They've been tracking you almost as long as I have. Then why? Because I have 50 men positioned around this hospital. Because I've spent the last 7 months ensuring that anyone who came near you ended up in the river. Because keeping you safe has been the only thing that mattered. Lena stared at him, trying to reconcile the man she'd loved with the monster she'd watched kill someone. Trying to understand how both could exist in the same person. "What do you want?" she finally asked. Dominic's jaw tightened. "I want you to come home. Both of you. Where I can protect you properly. Where Maya can grow up safe. She'll grow up in a world where her father murders people. She'll grow up alive," Dominic countered, "which is more than I can guarantee if you try to run again. Vincent won't stop, and there are others. Competitors. Enemies. People who would use you to get to me. As long as you exist, you're a target." "This is insane. This is reality." He leaned forward. "You saw something you shouldn't have that night in the garage. You ran, which made you look like a liability, and now you're carrying my child, which makes you leverage. The only way to keep you safe is to bring you into my world completely, as my family." "I am not your family. You're the mother of my daughter." His voice cracked slightly on the words. "That makes you family whether you want it or not." Lena closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. This couldn't be happening. She'd spent 7 months running, 7 months trying to build something safe. All of it had been an illusion. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't raise Maya in that world." "Then what's your alternative?" Dominic asked quietly. "Keep running? Hope I can protect you remotely forever? Wait until someone gets past my men and puts a bullet in your head while you're serving coffee?" "Stop. These are the choices, Lena. Come back to Chicago with me. Let me keep you both safe in the only way I know how. Or refuse and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering which day someone will finally get through." She wanted to tell him to go to hell, wanted to believe she could still find a way out, but she'd seen the photo, heard the exhaustion in his voice that suggested 7 months of constant vigilance. "If I agree," she said slowly, "I want terms." Something flickered in Dominic's eyes, surprise, maybe, or hope. "Name them." "I want my own money, my own accounts that you can't touch. I want to finish my teaching degree. And I want Maya to have as normal a life as possible. No exposure to your business, no knowledge of what you really do." "Done." The answer came too quickly, too easily. "You're agreeing to all that?" "Lena." He looked at her with an intensity that was almost painful. "I've spent 7 months keeping you alive from 1,000 miles away. Do you really think I won't agree to whatever terms you set if it means I can do it properly?" "What about love?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "You never mentioned love." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "I watched you on security cameras for 7 months, he finally said. Saw you working yourself to exhaustion at that diner. Saw you counting pennies in the grocery store, choosing between food and vitamins. Saw you crying alone in that studio apartment, trying to be brave." He paused. "Love is the wrong word for what I feel. It's too small, too simple." "Then what is it?" "Necessity." His dark eyes held hers. "You and Maya are my North Star now. Everything else is just noise." It wasn't a declaration of love. Wasn't even close to the romantic future Lena had once imagined. But it was honest. And honesty, she was learning, was worth more than pretty lies. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow. I've arranged a medical transport. Maya will be transferred to Northwestern's NICU, best in the country. You'll recover at the estate. Everything's ready." Of course it was. He'd probably been planning this since the moment he found out where she was. "And if I say no?" Dominic stood, adjusting his cuffs in that familiar gesture that used to make her heart flutter. "Then I'll station my men around this hospital, around your apartment, around every place you go. I'll protect you from the shadows like I have been. But Lena," he met her eyes, "eventually someone will get through. And when they do, you'll wish you'd accepted my offer." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I've made a lot of choices I'm not proud of," he said quietly. "But keeping you and Maya safe isn't one of them. Think about that." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with impossible decisions and no good options. She looked at the photo he'd left on her bedside table, the surveillance image proving she'd never been as hidden as she thought. 7 months of running, and she'd been visible the entire time. Dominic had let her believe she was free, had funded her escape, protected her from the shadows, given her the illusion of choice. Until now. Until the only choice left was the one he'd always intended her to make. Come home, or die trying to stay away. Lena pressed her hand to her aching incision, felt the emptiness where Maya had been, and wondered if she'd ever really had a choice at all. Outside her window, dawn broke over Tennessee, her last sunrise as a free woman. Tomorrow, she'd return to Chicago. Tomorrow, she'd step into Dominic Moretti's world. Not as his lover, not as his prisoner, but as something far more complicated, the mother of his child, bound to him by biology and circumstance and the terrible mathematics of survival. The question that kept her awake until the nurses came with morning medications was simple. How long until the cage he'd built felt like home? And what would be left of her when it did? The medical transport helicopter touched down on Northwestern Memorial Hospital's rooftop at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon, 24 hours after Dominic's ultimatum. Lena watched through the window as a full medical team rushed toward the aircraft, their coordination suggesting this wasn't their first high-stakes transfer. Maya, still impossibly small in her specialized incubator, was transferred with the kind of precision that came from either extensive practice or significant financial motivation. Probably both. "We've got her, Ms. Carter." The lead neonatologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her badge, offered a reassuring smile. "She'll be in excellent hands. Our NICU is one of the finest in the world." Lena wanted to argue that she was Emma Hartley, not Lena Carter, that her carefully constructed identity should still mean something, but the pretense felt pointless now. Dominic had stripped away 7 months of hiding in a single conversation. Her own ambulance followed 20 minutes later, the ride significantly less dramatic than her emergency arrival in Tennessee. This time she was stable, recovering, just another post-surgical patient being transferred between facilities. Except for the black SUVs that flanked the ambulance on both sides, except for the way the hospital staff moved with military efficiency, except for the unmistakable presence of armed security disguised as orderlies and maintenance workers. Dominic's protection wasn't subtle. It was absolute. Northwestern's private wing was nothing like the small-town Tennessee hospital. Here, everything gleamed with expensive modernity. The room they wheeled her into was more luxury hotel suite than medical facility. Hardwood floors, elegant furniture, windows overlooking Lake Michigan. A gilded cage, just as promised. "Someone will be up with your belongings shortly," a nurse informed her. "And Mr. Moretti left instructions that you're to have anything you need, anything at all." Lena nodded numbly. What she needed was to wake up from this nightmare, to rewind 7 months and never follow Dominic into that parking garage, to have the luxury of ignorance. But time only moved forward. The door opened again 30 minutes later. Not a nurse this time. Dominic entered carrying a designer bag Lena recognized as prohibitively expensive. He set it on the chair, his movements careful, almost cautious. "Your things from Tennessee are being packed and shipped," he said. "But I thought you might want some immediate necessities." Lena stared at the bag. "I don't want your money." "It's not about want. It's about need." He gestured to her hospital gown. "When you're cleared to leave this room, you'll need clothes. When Maya comes home, she'll need a nursery. These are logistics, Lena, not gifts." "Everything with you is a transaction." Something flickered across his face. "Not everything." She wanted to ask what he meant, but exhaustion was pulling at her. The surgery, the transfer, the complete upheaval of everything she'd built, it was too much. "I want to see Maya," she said instead. "The doctors want you to rest for a few more hours. Then I'll take you to her myself." "I don't need your permission." "No." Dominic moved closer to her bed. "You need your strength. Maya needs you healthy, so rest. Doctor's orders." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "There's a phone in the bag. Your number is the only one programmed in it. If you need anything, you call me directly." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts and the stunning view of a city she'd fled 7 months ago. She opened the designer bag. Inside were clothes in exactly her size, toiletries from expensive brands, and a smartphone that probably cost more than 2 months of her diner wages. The lock screen showed a single contact. "Dominic, No escape routes programmed in, no emergency alternatives, just him. Lena fell asleep hating how comfortable the hospital bed was. She woke to darkness outside her windows and Dr. Chen entering with a tablet. "Good news," the doctor said with genuine warmth. "Maya's settled in beautifully. All her vitals are stable and she's tolerating her feeds well. Would you like to see her now?" Finally, something that didn't feel like a negotiation. They wheeled Lena through pristine hallways to the NICU, where Maya lay in an incubator that looked significantly more advanced than the Tennessee one. More monitors, more technology, more everything. "You can touch her through the ports," Dr. Chen explained. "We encourage skin-to-skin contact as much as possible." Lena slipped her hand through the opening, felt Maya's impossibly tiny fingers wrap around one of hers. That grip, so small, so determined, shattered something inside her chest. "She's strong," Dr. Chen observed. "Stronger than many babies born at 32 weeks. You did well, keeping yourself healthy during the pregnancy." Lena thought of the canned soup dinners, the skipped meals when money was tight, the constant stress of hiding. She'd done her best with impossible circumstances. How long until she can come home? If she continues progressing like this, maybe 4 weeks? Possibly less. 4 weeks. A month of living in Dominic's world before Maya even left the hospital. "Miss Carter?" Dr. Chen touched her shoulder gently. "I know this situation is complicated, but whatever else is happening, your daughter is getting the best possible care. Focus on that." Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. She stayed with Maya for 2 hours, talking softly about nothing and everything. About the life she'd planned in Tennessee, the future she'd imagined. About how none of it had worked out, but they were together and alive, and that had to be enough. When exhaustion finally forced her back to her room, she found Dominic waiting in the chair by her window. "You should be resting," she said, more from habit than concern. "So should you." He stood as nurses helped her back into bed. "But I imagine sleep isn't coming easily." "Not particularly." Once they were alone again, Dominic pulled the chair closer to her bedside. The proximity should have felt threatening. Instead, it just felt inevitable. "We need to discuss logistics," he said. "Your favorite subject." "Lena," his voice carried a warning, "I'm trying to make this as easy as possible." "Easy would be letting us go. Easy would get you killed." He leaned forward. "Vincent Calabrese isn't the only threat. There are 3 other families who would love nothing more than to use you as leverage against me. And now that Maya exists, the stakes are exponentially higher." Lena's hand instinctively moved to her incision. "What exactly do these people want?" "Territory, power, the usual." Dominic's expression darkened. "I've been consolidating control in Chicago for 5 years. That doesn't happen without making enemies. So your solution is to make me and Maya targets by association?" "My solution is to make you untouchable." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of a massive estate behind iron gates. "This is where you'll live. 30-acre compound in Lake Forest. 24-hour security, state-of-the-art surveillance, staff vetted by people I trust with my life." The house looked like something from a magazine. Beautiful and cold and completely removed from anything Lena had ever known. A prison with nice landscaping. A home with protection. Dominic swiped to another photo, a nursery decorated in soft yellows and grays. Maya's room. "I had designers work from standard nursery layouts, but if you want changes, tell me." Lena stared at the image. It was perfect. Exactly what she might have chosen herself if she'd had unlimited resources. Which made it worse somehow. "You planned all this while I was in Tennessee." "I planned for every possible scenario," Dominic corrected. "This was always the most likely outcome." "You mean you always intended to force me back?" "I intended to keep you alive." His jaw tightened. Everything else was secondary. Lena closed her eyes, trying to organize her thoughts into something coherent. "What happens when Maya gets older, when she starts asking questions?" "We tell her the truth, age-appropriately." "The truth that her father runs a criminal empire?" "The truth that her father does complicated work to keep her safe." Dominic stood, paced to the window. "Lena, I'm not going to lie to our daughter, but I'm also not going to expose her to violence or danger. There's a middle ground." "In your world, there is no middle ground." "Then I'll create one." He turned back to face her. I've already started restructuring operations, moving into legitimate businesses. It won't happen overnight, but Maya will grow up with options. Real options. Lena wanted to believe him. Wanted to think a man who casually ordered executions could somehow transform into a regular father. But she'd seen his eyes in that parking garage, seen the absolute absence of hesitation. What happened to Marcus? She asked suddenly. The man you killed. Dominic went very still. You want to discuss this now? I want to know who I'm trusting with my daughter's life. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Marcus was skimming from operations in the Northwest Territory, he finally said. Over 18 months, he stole nearly $2 million, money that was supposed to fund legitimate businesses, pay employees, support families. So you killed him. So I enforced consequences that everyone in my world understands. Dominic's voice remained level. If I'd let it slide, 3 other territory managers would have started stealing within a week. Weakness invites chaos. Chaos gets people killed. That's a justification, not an explanation. It's reality. He moved closer again. You want me to say I enjoyed it? I didn't. You want me to say I regret it? I don't. Marcus knew the rules. He broke them. What happened next was inevitable. Lena felt sick. Not because of what he'd done, she'd had 7 months to process that, but because of how calmly he explained it, how thoroughly he believed his own logic. How many people have you killed? She whispered. Do you really want that answer? Yes. Dominic studied her face, looking for something. Directly. 7. Ordered? More than I can count without checking records. The number should have shocked her. Should have sent her screaming for security, demanding protection from this monster. Instead, she just felt tired. And you expect me to raise Maya in your world. I expect you to raise Maya in safety, Dominic corrected quietly. Everything else is negotiable. A nurse knocked, breaking the tension. Ms. Carter, time for your evening medications. Dominic stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place. I'll let you rest. But Lena, think about what I said. Think about what's actually at stake. After he left, Lena took her medications and tried to sleep. But her mind kept circling the same impossible question. How do you protect your daughter from danger when the danger is her own father? The next morning brought visitors Lena hadn't anticipated. Ms. Carter, this is Margaret Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen. A nurse introduced an elegant woman in her 60s. She's here to discuss some domestic arrangements. Margaret smiled warmly, carrying a leather portfolio. Mr. Moretti asked me to coordinate your transition to the estate. I've been his household manager for 8 years. Of course he has a household manager, Lena muttered. Margaret either didn't hear or chose to ignore the comment. She settled into the visitor's chair with practiced grace. I understand this is all very sudden. I'm here to make it as smooth as possible. Shall we start with your preferences for Maya's nursery? I saw the photos. It's already done. The foundation is done. But personal touches matter. Photos you'd like displayed, specific books, any family items you'd want incorporated. Margaret pulled out a tablet. I've also prepared a list of potential nannies for your review. I don't need a nanny. Perhaps not immediately, but when you're ready to finish your degree, Mr. Moretti mentioned you wanted to complete your teaching certification. You'll need qualified childcare. Lena blinked. He'd actually listened, actually remembered that detail from her list of demands. I don't know what I want, she admitted. That's perfectly understandable. Margaret's smile held genuine kindness. How about we start small? Tell me about your favorite color. What kind of books you enjoy? Whether you prefer coffee or tea in the morning. It felt absurd discussing breakfast beverages while her entire life crumbled and reformed into something unrecognizable. But Margaret's calm professionalism made it almost bearable. Coffee, Lena said finally. Strong, with cream. I like mysteries and historical fiction, and my favorite color is blue. Not navy, more like sky blue. Margaret made notes. Excellent. I'll make sure the kitchen is stocked with proper coffee, and I'll have the library organized to highlight those genres. As for blue, would you like that incorporated into your personal suite? My personal suite? Your room's at the estate, separate from Mr. Moretti's quarters, per his instructions. Complete privacy, your own bathroom and sitting room. He was very specific about that. Some of the tension in Lena's chest eased. Not sharing space with Dominic felt like the smallest victory, but she'd take it. They spent the next hour on practical details. Margaret never pushed, never made Lena feel trapped. Instead, she presented options, noted preferences, and somehow made the impossible situation feel almost manageable. One more thing, Margaret said as she prepared to leave. Mr. Moretti employs a full security team. You'll notice their presence, but they've been instructed to maintain respectful distance. If you ever feel uncomfortable, you can tell me directly. Can I tell them to leave entirely? Margaret's expression gentled. Ms. Carter, I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 8 years. I've seen him ruthless, calculated, even cold, but I've never seen him the way he's been these past 7 months. That man has barely slept, barely eaten. He's been running himself into the ground, keeping you safe. That's not my responsibility. No, Margaret agreed, but it is his truth. Whatever you think of him, whatever he's done, he cares. In his own complicated way. After Margaret left, Lena sat with those words. Dominic cared, in a possessive, controlling, fundamentally dangerous way. But perhaps it was still care, perhaps that had to be enough. Dr. Chen cleared her for short walks that afternoon. Lena immediately headed to the NICU, needing the grounding presence of her daughter. She found Dominic already there. He stood outside Maya's station, his hand pressed against the glass, watching their daughter with an expression Lena had never seen before. Vulnerable, awed, almost afraid. They said she opened her eyes today, he said without turning around. I missed it. Lena moved to stand beside him. There will be other firsts. Will there? He finally looked at her. Will you let me be part of those moments, or am I just the guard outside the gate? The question caught her off balance. She'd expected demands, control, ultimatums, not this raw uncertainty. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know how to do any of this. Neither do I. Dominic's laugh was hollow. I can negotiate territory deals and manage complex operations. But this? A daughter? I'm completely out of my depth. It was possibly the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. They stood in silence, watching Maya sleep, both of them navigating impossible terrain. My father was a monster, Dominic said quietly. Brutal, paranoid, cruel. He died when I was 16, and I swore I'd never become him. And yet you run his empire. I run it differently. Less violence, more strategy. I've cut enforcement actions by 60% in 5 years. He paused. That doesn't make me innocent, but it makes me better than what came before. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to point out that less violent still meant violent, but she was so tired of fighting. What do you want from me, Dominic? Really? He turned to face her fully. I want you to give us a chance, not to love me. I lost that right in the parking garage, but to build something functional, something that gives Maya stability. Functional, Lena repeated. What a romantic goal. Romance got us into this situation. Maybe practical will get us through it. There was logic in that, terrible as it was. I have conditions, Lena said. More than what I listed yesterday. Name them. I want weekly meetings where we discuss Maya's care. Equal say in decisions about her life. And I want you to be honest with me. Always. No more surveillance I don't know about. No more secrets. Dominic considered this. Agreed. With one addition. What? You stop planning to run. His dark eyes held hers. I know you, Lena. You're already looking for exits, calculating escape routes. Stop. Commit to trying this, and I'll commit to earning your trust. It felt like a trap, like a green would seal her fate forever. But looking at Maya through the glass, Lena realized her fate was already sealed. The moment she'd decided to keep this baby, she'd bound herself to Dominic Moretti. The only question was whether she'd fight that reality or find a way to survive it. 6 months, she said. I'll give this 6 months. But if it's not working, if Maya's in danger or I can't handle your world, we renegotiate. Fair enough. Dominic extended his hand. Lena stared at it. Shaking his hand felt symbolic, binding, but refusing felt childish. She took his hand, His grip was warm, firm, careful. 6 months, he agreed. They were released from the hospital 3 days later. Maya would remain in the NICU for a few more weeks, but Lena was cleared to recover at home. Home. The word felt foreign applied to Dominic's estate. The drive to Lake Forest took 40 minutes, black SUVs flanking them on both sides. Lena watched Chicago's skyline give way to wealthy suburbs, manicured lawns, the kind of prosperity she'd never imagined being part of. The estate was even more impressive in person. Iron gates opened onto a long driveway lined with old-growth trees. The house itself was modern but warm, all windows and stone in elegant proportions, nothing like a crime lord's fortress. Everything like a family home. Margaret met them at the door. "Welcome, Ms. Carter. Everything's ready for you." Inside was even more overwhelming. High ceilings, hardwood floors, art that was probably worth more than Lena's childhood home, but also comfortable furniture, soft lighting, fresh flowers in every room. "Your suite is on the second floor east wing," Margaret explained, leading them up a curved staircase. "Mr. Moretti's quarters are west wing, completely separate. The nursery is between them." Of course it was. Symbolic territory division with Maya as the middle ground. Lena's rooms took her breath away. Sky blue accents everywhere. Throw pillows, curtains, a soft rug, bookshelves already filled with mysteries and historical fiction. A window seat overlooking gardens that probably required a full-time staff. "If anything isn't to your liking, we can change it immediately," Margaret assured her. "It's perfect," Lena whispered, then hated herself for meaning it. Dominic appeared in the doorway. "I'll let you settle in. Dinner's at 7 if you're feeling up to it. Otherwise, I can have something sent to your room." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Lena sank onto the impossibly comfortable bed and tried not to cry. This was her life now. Beautiful rooms and designer clothes and a daughter in the hospital. Safety purchased with her freedom. Protection that felt like possession. But Maya would be safe. Fed, clothed, educated, protected from every threat Dominic's world could generate. That had to matter more than Lena's lost independence. That had to be enough. Dinner that first night was surprisingly normal. Dominic joined her in a casual dining room, not the formal one Margaret had shown her, and they ate pasta while discussing Maya's progress. "Dr. Chen thinks she might be ready in 3 weeks instead of 4, Dominic said. "She's exceeding every milestone." "She's a fighter." Lena pushed food around her plate. "She gets that from both of us, unfortunately." Unfortunately? 2 stubborn people trying to raise a child. That's going to be complicated. Dominic's mouth quirked. "Probably. But complicated is better than easy. Easy means someone gave up." They fell into careful routine over the following days. Mornings at the hospital with Maya. Afternoons where Lena explored the estate or video called with Margaret about household details. Evenings where she and Dominic shared cautious meals, learning to be civil, if not friendly. He never pushed, never demanded more than she offered, just existed in parallel, giving her space while maintaining constant presence. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt almost safe. That realization terrified her more than anything else. 2 weeks into her new life, Lena woke at 3 a.m. to sounds downstairs. She grabbed her phone, ready to call for help, then remembered. She lived with armed security. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a threat. Probably. She found Dominic in the kitchen, still wearing his suit from earlier, staring at espresso like it held answers. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Did I wake you?" "No, I'm still adjusting to the quiet." She moved to the coffee maker. "Want a real cup instead of that tiny torture?" "I didn't know you knew how to use an espresso machine." "I worked at a coffee shop in college. Some skills stick." She started making 2 proper lattes, muscle memory taking over. "Why are you awake?" Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Deal went bad. Lost a shipment and 3 good men." Lena's hands stilled. "Dead?" "Arrested. Vincent's people tipped off the feds." He took the latte she offered. "They'll be out in 72 hours, but the message was clear. He's escalating." "Because of me?" "Because of his own ambition. You're just the excuse." Dominic sipped the coffee, his expression softening slightly. "This is excellent." "Don't sound so surprised." Lena leaned against the counter. "What happens now?" with Vincent. I make it clear there are consequences for going after my operations. His voice was casual, but his eyes were cold. Details you don't need to know. There it was. The line between her world and his. Will people die? She asked bluntly. Dominic met her gaze. Possibly. Does that change anything? I don't know. Lena wrapped her hands around her mug. I don't know how to be okay with who you are. I'm not asking you to be okay with it, just to accept it exists. He set down his cup. I'm not going to lie to you, Lena. This is what I do. What I am. You wanted honesty. This is it. She should have walked away. Should have retreated to her beautiful rooms and pretended she couldn't hear the violence in his voice. Instead, she stayed. Tell me about the men who were arrested, the ones you lost. Dominic looked surprised again. Why? Because you said they were good men. I want to understand what that means to you. So he told her. About Tony, who had 3 kids and coached Little League. About Marcus, different Marcus, who was putting his sister through medical school. About James, who'd worked for Dominic since they were both teenagers. Human details that complicated the simple narrative of criminals getting caught. I'll take care of their families, Dominic said quietly. Make sure everyone's provided for while they're inside. That doesn't make it okay. No, but it's what I can do. They finished their coffee in silence that felt less hostile than before, less like enemies forced into proximity, more like 2 people navigating impossible circumstances. When Lena finally went back to bed, she fell asleep thinking about gray areas and complicated morality, thinking maybe the world wasn't as black and white as she'd believed. Maya came home on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks and 2 days after her premature birth. The nursery was perfect, soft yellow walls, a crib positioned to catch morning light, monitors that probably cost more than most cars. Lena had added personal touches, a quilt her grandmother made, photos of her parents, books she'd read as a child, building a bridge between who she'd been and who Maya would become. Dominic stood in the doorway as Lena settled their daughter into the crib for the first time outside a hospital. She's really here, he said quietly. She's really here. Neither of them mentioned how surreal it felt, how domestic, how much it looked like a real family instead of what they actually were. That night, Maya woke every 2 hours. Lena stumbled through feedings, exhausted and overwhelmed. Around 4 a.m., she found Dominic in the nursery, holding Maya against his chest while she fussed. You should sleep, he said. I can handle this. You have work tomorrow. So do you. Recovering counts as work. Lena was too tired to argue. She watched him sway gently, murmuring something in Italian to their daughter. What are you saying? She asked. Telling her about her grandmother, my mother. His voice was soft. She died when I was young. I want Maya to know about her. It was such a normal thing to do, such a fatherly gesture. Lena's throat tightened. What was she like? Strong, smarter than my father ever realized. She's the one who taught me that violence should be a last resort, not a first choice. He looked up. I wish she could have met Maya. Me too, Lena whispered, surprising herself by meaning it. The 6-month trial period stretched ahead of them, uncertain and complicated. But standing in that nursery at 4 a.m, watching Dominic cradle their daughter with unexpected gentleness, Lena thought maybe, just maybe, they might figure it out. Not love. Not yet. Maybe never. But something functional. Something that could keep Maya safe and give her the childhood she deserved. The illusion of normalcy lasted exactly 6 weeks. Lena had started to believe it might work. The careful routine they'd built felt almost sustainable. Mornings with Maya, afternoons where she'd started online coursework toward her teaching certification, evenings where she and Dominic maintained their cautious civility. She'd even stopped flinching when his security team shadowed her to the grocery store or the pediatrician's office. Stockholm syndrome, maybe. Or just exhaustion, winning over resistance. Then Vincent Calabrese sent a message that shattered everything. It arrived during Maya's 8-week checkup. Lena sat in the pediatrician's waiting room, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her carrier, when Dominic's lead security guard, a stone-faced man named Marcus, who'd replaced the arrested one, appeared at her side. We need to leave. Now. The urgency in his voice made her pulse spike. What's happening? Car's out front. I'll explain once you're secure. Lena grabbed the carrier, her hands already shaking. The other mothers in the waiting room watched with undisguised curiosity as Marcus hustled her outside, where 3 black SUVs waited with engines running. She was in the middle vehicle and moving before she could process what was happening. "Someone want to tell me why we just fled a pediatrician's office?" Lena demanded, checking Maya frantically. Still sleeping, still fine, completely unaware of her mother's rising panic. The driver met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Vincent's crew hit one of Mr. Moretti's restaurants an hour ago. They left a message specifically mentioning you and the baby." Ice flooded Lena's veins. "What kind of message?" "The kind that means you stay inside the estate until this is handled." They drove in tense silence back to Lake Forest. Lena kept her hand on Maya's carrier the entire time, as if physical contact could somehow protect her daughter from threats she couldn't see or fight. Dominic met them at the front door. His expression was controlled, but Lena had learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the coldness in his eyes that meant someone was about to suffer. "Are you both okay?" He took Maya's carrier, his hands gentle, despite the fury radiating from him. "We're fine. What the hell is going on? Inside first, then we'll talk." Margaret appeared to take Maya upstairs for her nap. Lena wanted to protest, wanted to keep her daughter close, but the look on Dominic's face suggested whatever conversation was coming needed to happen away from the baby. He led her to his office, a room she'd never entered before. Dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that probably hid a dozen secrets. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking, handed her one, then drained his own in a single swallow. "Vincent sent 4 men into Giovanni's during the lunch rush," he said flatly. "They fired shots into the ceiling, cleared the place out, then spray-painted a message on the wall." "What did it say?" Dominic pulled out his phone, showed her a photo that made her stomach turn. "Pretty family you've got, Moretti. Be a shame if something happened." Below the words was a grainy photograph of Lena and Maya leaving Northwestern Hospital weeks ago. "He's been watching us," Lena whispered. "He's been probing for weaknesses." This was him announcing he found one. Dominic set down his phone with controlled precision. "I'm handling it." "How?" "You don't want those details. Stop protecting me from reality." "What are you going to do?" Dominic looked at her for a long moment. "I'm going to make it very clear that threatening my family has consequences, permanent ones." The word family hung between them, complicated and loaded. They weren't a family. Not really. They were 2 people bound by biology and circumstance, playing house in a gilded cage. But Maya made them something, some configuration that didn't have a clean label. "Will people die?" Lena asked, echoing their middle-of-the-night kitchen conversation. "Yes." The certainty in his voice should have horrified her. Instead, she felt something darker, something that recognized the cold mathematics of survival. "Will we be safe after?" "Safer. Vincent needs to understand there are lines even he can't cross." Dominic moved to the window overlooking the grounds. "I've been trying to de-escalate for months, but he's interpreting restraint as weakness. So you're going to show him strength. I'm going to show him annihilation." He turned back to her. "Which means you and Maya need to stay inside this estate until it's done. No exceptions." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to assert her independence, insist she wouldn't be imprisoned, but she'd seen the photograph, seen proof that Vincent's men had been close enough to capture her and Maya on camera, close enough to do far worse. "How long?" she asked quietly. "A week, maybe less. And then?" "Then Vincent will either back down or be removed from the equation entirely." Dominic's expression was carved granite. "Either way, you'll be safe." He left her alone in his office, presumably to coordinate whatever violence he had planned. Lena sank into his leather chair, still holding the untouched whiskey, and tried to figure out how she felt about any of this. Terrified, obviously. For Maya, for herself, for the future they were supposed to be building. But underneath the fear was something else. Something that whispered she'd chosen this world when she agreed to stay. That accepting Dominic's protection meant accepting his methods. That maybe she was more complicit than she wanted to admit. The week that followed was surreal. The estate transformed into a fortress. Additional security appeared, patrols doubled, every entrance monitored with military precision. Lena stayed inside as ordered, watching the world through expensive windows while Dominic disappeared for hours at a time. He never told her where he went or what he did, just returned late each night, exhausted and distant, checking on Maya before retreating to his separate wing. On the fourth day, Lena found him in the nursery at 2 a.m., holding their sleeping daughter with an expression that looked like grief. "You should be in bed," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep." He didn't look up. "Keeps running through my head, what could have happened if Vincent had been bolder? If he'd made a move before I had security in place?" Lena moved closer. "But he didn't." This time, Dominic's voice was raw. "There will always be a next threat, Lena. Always someone looking for leverage. That's what it means to be part of my world." "I know." "Do you?" He finally met her eyes. "Because you can still leave." "I meant what I said about the 6-month trial. If this is too much—" "And go where?" Lena interrupted. "Back to hiding in small towns, waiting for the next threat to find me? At least here Maya has protection." "Maya has protection anywhere I am, but you deserve more than a life defined by my enemies." It was possibly the most selfless thing he'd ever said to her. The admission that keeping them close might be selfish rather than practical. "What happened today?" Lena asked. "With Vincent." Dominic was quiet for a moment, carefully placing Maya back in her crib. "We had a conversation. He understands the boundaries now." "Did anyone die?" "Not today." The non-answer was answer enough. Whatever Dominic had done, it had involved enough violence to send a message without triggering all-out war. "I should feel guilty," Lena said. "That violence is being done in my name." "But you don't." "No." She met his gaze. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you honest." Dominic moved toward the door, paused. "For what it's worth, I don't enjoy this. The threats, the violence, the constant calculation. But it's the only language men like Vincent understand." "What about men like you?" The question stopped him. "What do you mean?" "What language do you understand? What would it take for you to choose a different path?" Dominic looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I don't know. But I'm starting to think I want to find out." He left her standing in the nursery, moonlight streaming through expensive windows, wondering what it meant that his answer had sounded almost hopeful. The crisis with Vincent ended not with a bang, but with a carefully orchestrated press conference. 3 days after their nursery conversation, Dominic announced a major expansion of his legitimate restaurant holdings, a partnership with the Calabrese family that would bring both operations under a single corporate umbrella. Lena watched the news coverage from the estate's living room, trying to decode what she was seeing. "I don't understand," she said when Dominic returned that evening. "A week ago he was threatening us. Now you're business partners? Now we have aligned interests?" Dominic loosened his tie, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Vincent wanted territory and respect. I gave him both, publicly, in a way that makes him look successful instead of defeated. And the threats? Part of the negotiation. He pushed, I pushed back harder, and we found equilibrium." He poured himself a drink. "He got legitimate expansion into my markets. I got his explicit guarantee that you and Maya are permanently off limits." Lena tried to process this. "So the violence, the security lockdown, all of that was just posturing?" "That was establishing credible consequences. Vincent needed to understand that threatening my family would cost him more than he could afford to pay." Dominic met her eyes. "The partnership was the exit ramp, a way for both of us to win." "That's sociopathic." "That's business." He sipped his whiskey. "In my world, every conflict is a negotiation. Violence is just one of many tools. And if negotiation hadn't worked, then Vincent would have had an unfortunate accident and I'd be dealing with his successor." Dominic's voice was matter of fact. "But this outcome is cleaner, fewer casualties, more stability, and Maya grows up with one less threat." Lena should have been horrified by the casual way he discussed potential murder. Instead, she found herself analyzing the strategy, understanding the cold logic. When had she started thinking like him? The question haunted her through the following weeks as life returned to their careful normal. Maya grew, hit her developmental milestones right on schedule. Lena progressed through her online coursework, surprising herself by enjoying the intellectual challenge. Dominic continued his mysterious work, but the tension that had defined those crisis days gradually eased. They started having dinner together more often. Real conversations instead of careful updates about Maya. He asked about her classes, listened when she vented about difficult assignments. She asked about his legitimate businesses, the restaurants, real estate holdings, import companies that apparently weren't fronts for anything illegal. I meant what I said about restructuring, he told her one evening over Margaret's excellent chicken piccata. The partnership with Vincent is just the beginning. I'm moving everything toward legitimate operations. That's not something that happens overnight. No, it'll take years. Maybe a decade. He refilled her wine glass. But I want Maya to inherit businesses, not blood feuds. What about the men who work for you? The ones doing the illegal operations? They'll transition or find new employment. I'm not abandoning people, but I'm also not maintaining the status quo for their sake. Dominic pushed food around his plate. My father built an empire on violence and fear. I'm trying to build something that can survive in daylight. Lena studied him across the table. Why? What changed? You mean besides having a daughter? You were already consolidating before Maya. Before me. He was quiet for a long moment. My father died violently. So did his father. So will I, eventually, if I stay on the current path. I'm 34 years old, Lena. I'd like to see 40. The vulnerability in his admission was startling. Dominic so rarely let his guard down, so rarely acknowledged anything that could be perceived as weakness. I'd like you to see 40, too, Lena said softly. His eyes met hers, surprise flickering across his features. Yeah? Maya deserves to know her father, not just hear stories about him. Something shifted in the air between them. Not attraction exactly, or not just attraction, something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. Two people who'd started as strangers, been thrown into impossible circumstances, and were somehow finding their way towards something that might eventually resemble partnership. I'm enrolling in business school, Dominic said suddenly. Executive program Northwestern starts in the fall. Lena blinked. Seriously? If I'm going to run legitimate operations, I should probably understand legitimate business practice. He smiled slightly. The irony isn't lost on me. Dominic Moretti, MBA candidate. Would have thought. Certainly not anyone who knew me 5 years ago. He stood, began clearing dishes. But people change. Circumstances change them. Lena watched him move around the kitchen with unexpected domesticity. This man who ordered executions and negotiated with crime lords was doing dishes in an apron that said, "World's Best Dad," Margaret's idea of humor. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. That night in the parking garage. If I hadn't seen it, would you have ever told me? Dominic stopped, his hands still in soapy water. Eventually. Maybe not the details, but yes. I couldn't have married you without you understanding who I really was. We're not married. No, but I was planning to ask. He dried his hands, turned to face her. Before you saw Marcus. I had a ring. Reservations at that French place. The whole romantic proposal. Lena's breath caught. You never said. What would have been the point? You ran. And honestly, you were right to. I had no business asking someone like you to enter my world. Someone like me? Good. Honest. The kind of person who teaches children and believes in redemption. Dominic's expression was complicated. You deserved better than what I could offer. Past tense? I don't know. He moved closer. I'm trying to become someone worthy of what you deserve, but I don't know if that's possible. But Lena stood, closing the distance between them. I'm not the same person I was 8 months ago. Running and hiding changed me. This, she gestured at the kitchen, the estate beyond, is changing me more. Into what? I don't know yet. She was close enough now to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. But I'm tired of pretending I'm a hostage here. I made choices too. I stayed when I could have kept running. I'm raising Maya in your world when I could have fought harder for alternatives. Lena, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm not ready to forgive what you are. I might never be. But I'm starting to understand it. And that's something. Dominic looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. What are you saying? I'm saying the 6-month trial period ends in 2 weeks, and I'm not leaving. You're sure? No. Lena laughed shakily. I'm not sure about anything except that Maya needs stability, and this is the safest place for her. Everything else we figure out as we go. That's not much of a foundation. It's what we have. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this choice, he said quietly. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then I promise to try, every single day. Lena let herself lean into his touch, just for a moment. It wasn't love, wasn't even close to the simple romance she'd imagined with the man she thought he was. But it was real, complicated and flawed and built on truth instead of illusion. Maybe that was enough to build on. The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Margaret presented Lena with a detailed financial portfolio, accounts in her name, investments, a trust fund for Maya that Dominic had established. This is too much, Lena protested, staring at numbers that seemed impossible. It's yours, Margaret said firmly. Mr. Moretti was very specific. Complete financial independence, no strings attached. He can't access these accounts even if he wanted to. Why would he do this? Margaret's smile was knowing. Because he's trying to prove you're here by choice, not coercion. The money should have felt like a bribe. Instead, it felt like freedom. Real freedom, backed by resources that meant she could leave tomorrow if she chose. The fact that she didn't want to was its own revelation. Lena started accompanying Dominic to his legitimate business meetings. At first just to observe, to understand what he actually did beyond the vague descriptions. But gradually, her input became valued. Her teaching background gave her insight into training programs. Her outsider perspective highlighted inefficiencies longtime employees had stopped seeing. You're good at this, Dominic said after she'd presented a restructuring plan for one of his restaurant chains. Have you thought about business school yourself? I'm trying to finish my teaching certification. You could do both. The executive program I'm in has flexible scheduling. The idea lodged in her brain. Business school. Real career options beyond teaching, as much as she loved it. Options she'd never had before. I'll think about it, she said. That evening, putting Maya to bed, Lena realized she'd started thinking in terms of long-term plans. Not escape routes or contingencies, but actual futures that involve staying. The shift was subtle but seismic. She found Dominic in his office, reviewing contracts. He looked up when she entered, surprised. Everything okay? I want to learn. Lena sat in the chair across from his desk. About your businesses. All of them, not just the legitimate ones. His expression shuddered. Why? Because if I'm staying, if I'm raising our daughter in this world, I should understand it completely. Not the sanitized version you show me, but the reality. Lena, some things... No more protection, she interrupted. No more carefully edited truth. Show me everything and let me decide what I can handle. Dominic studied her for a long moment. You might not like what you see. I already don't like what I've seen. But ignorance isn't protection, it's vulnerability. He seemed to wrestle with the decision. Then he pulled out a thick file folder, set it on the desk between them. This is everything. Financial records, operation details, the full organizational structure. Including the parts I'm still running that aren't exactly legal. Lena opened the folder. Pages of data, names, transactions that painted a picture far more complex than she'd imagined. There's still smuggling, she said, reading through one section. Luxury goods, avoiding import duties. Yes, I'm phasing it out, but it's not gone yet. And this, she pointed to another page, this is money laundering. Through legitimate businesses. Again, transitioning away, but it's a process. Lena kept reading, her stomach churning. Gambling operations, protection rackets disguised as security services, political contributions that looked suspiciously like bribes. You said you'd cut enforcement actions by 60%. I did. 5 years ago, I was running twice this amount of questionable activity. She looked up at him. You're proud of that? I'm realistic about that. Dominic leaned back. Rome wasn't built in a day. And criminal empires don't transform overnight, but the trajectory is clear. Less illegal revenue every year, more legitimate operations replacing them. How long until it's all legitimate? At current pace? 8 to 10 years, faster if the business school program teaches me better strategies. Lena closed the folder, her mind racing. This was the reality. Not a monster, but not a hero either. Just a man trying to climb out of a hole his father had dug, one business decision at a time. I want updates, she said. Monthly. Show me the progress, the setbacks, everything. You're serious? You want me to be a real partner in this? Then treat me like one. She stood. No more secrets, Dominic. Not about business, not about threats, not about anything that affects our family. There was that word again. Family. This time, neither of them flinched from it. Agreed, Dominic said. Complete transparency. Even when it's ugly? Especially then. Lena nodded, moved toward the door, then turned back. Thank you for showing me the truth. You're probably the first person who's ever thanked me for that. Maybe I'm the first person you've trusted with it. His expression suggested she might be right. That night, Lena lay awake thinking about trust and truth and the complicated mathematics of building a life with someone fundamentally different from yourself. She'd entered this arrangement believing she could stay separate, maintain moral high ground while accepting Dominic's protection. But protection and complicity were two sides of the same coin. The money in her accounts came from those questionable operations. The security keeping Maya safe was funded by activities she'd once condemned. Her comfortable life was built on a foundation that wasn't entirely legal. She could judge Dominic for his choices. Or she could acknowledge her own. The latter felt more honest. Down the hall, she heard Maya crying. Before she could get up, she heard Dominic's door open, his soft footsteps heading to the nursery. She found him there 5 minutes later, swaying gently with their daughter against his chest, singing something in Italian that sounded like a lullaby. I've got her, Lena said softly. So do I. But he transferred Maya to her arms anyway. She just needed a moment. They stood together in the quiet nursery, both holding their daughter, both protecting the small life they'd created from a complicated world. I applied to the business program, Lena said, the executive MBA. If I get in, I start in January. Dominic's smile was genuine. You'll get in. You sound confident. You're brilliant, Lena. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see that. The compliment settled warm in her chest. We'll both be in school then. 2 parents getting MBAs while raising an infant. That's ambitious. We've survived worse odds. He was right. They'd survived her running, his finding her, threats from rivals, and the complete collapse of everything they'd thought they knew about each other. Business school seemed almost easy by comparison. I'm glad I stayed, Lena admitted quietly. Yeah? Yeah. She looked up at him over Maya's sleeping form. I'm still angry about the parking garage. Still struggling with who you are. But I'm glad we're trying. Me too. They put Maya back in her crib together, their movements synchronized from weeks of shared parenting. At the door, Dominic paused. Lena, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the way we started, for the circumstances that brought us here. You deserved better. Maybe. She considered this. But deserving better and finding something worth keeping aren't mutually exclusive. His expression suggested she'd surprised him again. Is that what this is? Worth keeping? I think it might be. Ask me again in another 6 months. Deal. He left her in the nursery doorway, moonlight painting everything silver. Lena looked at her sleeping daughter, at the beautiful room in the beautiful house protected by complicated men and questionable methods. Worth keeping, she'd said. The truth was more nuanced. This life wasn't what she'd imagined or wanted. But it was real, built on honest foundation instead of romantic illusions. And maybe, just maybe, that made it stronger than what she'd lost. Downstairs, she heard Dominic moving around his office, working late again, building his legitimate empire one contract at a time, trying to become someone worthy of the choice she'd made. Lena went back to her room, climbed into expensive sheets, and slept without nightmares for the first time in months. The cage had been real. But somewhere along the way, someone had left the door open, and she'd chosen to stay inside anyway. That fragile peace lasted 3 months before reality came crashing back with devastating force. Maya was 5 months old, thriving and perfect, when Lena walked into Dominic's office unannounced and found him destroying his phone with methodical violence. He slammed it against the desk repeatedly, glass shattering, the expensive device reduced to fragments in seconds. She'd never seen him lose control like this. "What happened?" she asked, instinct keeping her in the doorway rather than approaching. Dominic looked up, his eyes wild in a way that made her heart stop. "Federal investigation. They've got wiretaps, financial records, witness testimony, 3 years of surveillance I didn't know about." The words felt like they were coming from underwater. "They're coming after you?" "They're coming after everyone. Me, Vincent, half the family's in Chicago." He swept the phone fragments off his desk. Someone flipped, someone high up, and now it's all unraveling. Lena's mind raced through implications. What does that mean for us? It means everything I've been building, all the legitimate transition, might not matter. Dominic moved to the window, his shoulders rigid. They have evidence from before I started restructuring, enough to put me away for 20 years. 20 years. Maya would be an adult before he got out. Can you fight it? I have lawyers scrambling right now. But Lena. He turned to face her. This is bad. Really bad. And it gets worse. Her stomach dropped. How? They know about you. About Maya. He pulled out a different phone, showed her a legal document. You're listed as a person of interest. They want to question you about my activities, my finances, anything you might know. Lena read the subpoena with growing horror. Her name, her real name, Lena Carter, printed in official government documentation requesting her testimony before a grand jury. I don't know anything about your illegal operations. They don't care. They'll ask anyway, put you under oath, and if you refuse to answer, they can charge you with obstruction. That's insane. That's federal prosecution. Dominic's voice was flat. They're building a RICO case. Racketeering. They'll use every tool they have, including threatening the people close to targets. Lena sank into his desk chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. So what do we do? My lawyers are trying to negotiate immunity for you, argue that you had no knowledge of illegal activities, that you're just an innocent party caught in the crossfire. Which is basically true. Is it? Dominic's laugh was bitter. You've been living here for months, accepting money from my accounts. You've sat in on business meetings, reviewed financial records. A good prosecutor could argue you knew exactly what was happening. The implications hit her like a physical blow. She'd thought transparency meant protection. Instead, it had made her complicit. I could go to prison. The words came out as a whisper. Not if I can prevent it. Dominic crossed to her, knelt so they were eye level. Listen to me. I will do whatever it takes to keep you and Maya safe. If that means taking full responsibility, if that means pleading guilty to things I didn't do, I'll do it. You can't. I absolutely can. His intensity was almost frightening. You were right when you said you deserved better than my world. This is proof, and I won't let my choices destroy your life. Lena wanted to argue, but the fear was overwhelming. She thought of Maya sleeping upstairs, completely innocent, completely vulnerable. What happened to babies when both parents went to prison? I need to think, she said shakily. Take all the time you need. But Lena, don't talk to anyone about this without my lawyers present. Not your friends, not random phone calls, nobody. The feds could be recording anything. The paranoia that suggestion induced was suffocating. Her entire world had become a potential threat. She spent the afternoon in Maya's nursery, holding her daughter while trying to process the new reality. Everything they'd built, the careful trust, the tentative partnership, the hope that maybe they could make this work, all of it was crumbling. Margaret found her there at dinner time. Mr. Moretti asked me to bring you something to eat. You haven't left this room in hours. I'm not hungry. Nevertheless, Margaret set down a tray with soup and bread. And he wanted me to tell you that his legal team will be here tomorrow morning to discuss options. Options. As if there were good choices in any of this. Margaret? Lena looked up at the older woman who'd become unexpectedly important in her life. Did you know? About the illegal operations? Margaret's expression was carefully neutral. I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 8 years. I know what I need to know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he's a better man than his father, and he's trying to be better still. That counts for something. After Margaret left, Lena fed Maya and tried to imagine explaining to her daughter someday why Mommy had made such catastrophic choices. Tried to find words that would make any of this make sense. She couldn't. Dominic appeared in the doorway after Maya was asleep. He looked exhausted, aged years in a single afternoon. Can we talk? He asked quietly. They went to the living room, neutral territory. Lena curled into the corner of the expensive sofa while Dominic poured drinks they probably shouldn't have but desperately needed. My lawyers presented 3 options, he said without preamble. First option, we both cooperate fully. Tell them everything we know. In exchange, they'll recommend reduced sentences and you'd likely get probation rather than prison time. And you? 10 to 15 years probably, maybe less with good behavior. Lena's chest tightened. What's the second option? I take full responsibility for everything. Plead guilty, testify that you had no knowledge or involvement. You walk away clean, but I'm looking at the full 20 years. No. The word came out fierce. You can't do that. Maya needs her father. Maya needs at least one parent who's not in prison. Dominic met her eyes. If we both go down, what happens to her? Foster care, the system? The thought was unbearable, but so was the thought of him sacrificing everything. What's the third option? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. We run. Tonight. I have resources they don't know about. Identities already prepared. We take Maya and disappear. South America, probably. Somewhere without extradition treaties. Lena stared at him. You're serious? Completely. I have $50 million in untraceable accounts. Properties purchased under shell companies. Everything we'd need to start over. As fugitives. As a family. Somewhere safe. He leaned forward. I know it's insane. I know it means giving up everything here. But at least we'd be together. The proposal should have been horrifying. Instead, Lena found herself actually considering it. What did they have in Chicago except investigations and threats? What kind of life could they build while looking over their shoulders for federal agents? If we run, we can never come back, she said slowly. No. Maya would grow up stateless. No real education, no normal life. We could provide education, and normal is overrated. Dominic's voice took on an edge of desperation. Lena, I've spent the last 8 hours gaming out every scenario. This is the only one where we all stay together and free. It's also the one where we're looking over our shoulders forever. We're already doing that here. He had a point. The last 3 months of relative peace had been an illusion. They'd still been surrounded by threats, just different ones. I need more than a few hours to decide something this massive, Lena said. We have 48 hours before the grand jury convenes. After that, running becomes significantly harder. 2 days to choose between prison, separation, or exile. The options were all terrible. Let me sleep on it, she finally said. Can you at least give me that? Dominic nodded, defeated. Of course. But Lena, whatever you decide, I'll support it. If you want to cooperate, testify against me. Save yourself. I understand. You'd let me testify against you? I'd do anything to keep you and Maya safe, even if it means losing everything else. The vulnerability in his admission broke something inside her chest. This man who'd built his identity on control and power was offering to surrender completely. For them. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her expensive bed, listening to Maya's soft breathing through the baby monitor, and tried to find a path through the impossible. Every option meant loss. The question was what they could afford to lose. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She found Dominic in his office where he had apparently spent the night. Legal documents covered every surface, evidence of his own sleepless calculations. I'm not testifying against you, she said without preamble. He looked up, surprised. Lena, let me finish. She moved into the room, stood across the desk from him. I'm also not running, and neither are you. Then what? We fight. Together. Lena placed her hands flat on the desk. You said you have the best lawyers in Chicago. We use them. We challenge every piece of evidence, every witness. We make them prove their case beyond reasonable doubt. That could take years, and we might still lose. Then we lose together. She met his gaze steadily. But we don't run, and we don't surrender. Maya deserves parents who fight for their family. Dominic stood slowly. This could destroy everything. Everything's already destroyed. This way we at least go down swinging. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or respect. You're sure about this? No, but I'm sure I'm not abandoning you to face this alone. Lena moved around the desk. You said you wanted to become someone worthy of what I deserve. Well, this is your chance. Fight this the right way. No bribes, no threats, no backroom deals. Just excellent legal defense and the truth. The truth is I'm guilty of most of what they're alleging. The truth is you've been trying to change. That has to count for something. Dominic pulled her into a sudden embrace, his arms wrapping around her with desperate intensity. Lena let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort in his solid presence. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other against the storm. Okay, Dominic said finally. We fight, but on one condition. What? If it goes badly, if it looks like you're actually going to be charged, you take Maya and run without me. Use the resources I've set aside. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to save me. Lena pulled back to look at him. That's not a condition I can agree to. Then we're at an impasse. Fine. We'll argue about it later. Right now, call your lawyers. Tell them we're fighting this properly. The legal team descended on the estate by noon. 4 attorneys, 2 investigators, and enough briefcases to stock a law library. They took over the dining room, transforming it into a war room. The good news, the lead attorney, a fierce woman named Patricia Chen, who was apparently Margaret's sister, announced, is that most of their case relies on witness testimony from people with credibility issues. Criminals making deals to reduce their own sentences. And the bad news, Lena asked? They have financial records showing money laundering through several of Mr. Moretti's businesses. That's harder to dismiss. Patricia spread documents across the table. But if we can show these were legitimate transactions that happen to involve cash-heavy businesses, restaurants, for instance, we might create reasonable doubt. What about the wiretaps? Dominic asked. We're challenging those on Fourth Amendment grounds. If we can get them suppressed, half their case disappears. The attorneys talked for 3 hours, outlining strategy, identifying weaknesses in the prosecution's case, building their defense. Lena listened with growing understanding of just how complex this would be. Ms. Carter, Patricia turned to her, you're listed as a person of interest, but we believe we can prevent actual charges. Your relationship with Mr. Moretti is recent, you have no criminal history, and we can demonstrate you had no involvement in business operations before this year. What if they offer me a deal to testify against him? They will absolutely offer you that. And you need to be prepared to refuse convincingly. Patricia's expression was serious. If you accept immunity and then lie or omit information, you can be charged with perjury. If you tell the truth about what you know, which isn't much, you undermine their case against Mr. Moretti. So your best option is to invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refuse to answer questions. Won't that make me look guilty? It makes you look smart, and it prevents you from accidentally saying something that could be used against either of you. The legal strategy was sound, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling they were building a defense on technicalities rather than innocence. Patricia, she said carefully, what are our actual chances? The attorney was quiet for a moment. If I'm being honest, 50-50. Federal prosecutors have a 95% conviction rate for a reason. They don't bring cases they can't win. But this case has vulnerabilities. And Mr. Moretti has resources to fund a real defense. So we have a fighting chance. 50-50. A coin flip that would determine whether Maya grew up with her father or visiting him in prison. The legal proceedings began with brutal swiftness. Grand jury indictments came down the following week. Dominic was charged with racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Bail was set at $5 million, which he posted immediately. Lena wasn't charged, but the subpoena for her testimony arrived the same day. Remember, Patricia coached her before the grand jury appearance, you can refuse to answer any question by invoking the Fifth Amendment. They'll pressure you, suggest that only guilty people take the Fifth, but don't be intimidated. It's your constitutional right. Sitting in the federal building's waiting room, Lena felt like she was living someone else's nightmare. The other witnesses waiting to testify looked hardened, experienced with the criminal justice system. She was a kindergarten teacher who'd made catastrophically bad choices. The grand jury room was intimidating, serious-faced citizens, a stern prosecutor, everything designed to make witnesses feel small and exposed. Ms. Carter, you're aware you're under oath, the prosecutor began. Yes. How long have you been in a relationship with Dominic Moretti? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer. The prosecutor's expression hardened. Ms. Carter, you're not currently charged with any crime. You have nothing to fear from answering. Nevertheless, I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Are you aware that Mr. Moretti runs illegal gambling operations? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Have you received money from Mr. Moretti that you knew came from illegal activities? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. It went on for 45 minutes. Every question met with the same response. The prosecutor grew increasingly frustrated, the grand jurors increasingly skeptical. But Patricia had been right. They couldn't force her to answer. When she finally left the federal building, Dominic was waiting outside despite his lawyer's advice to stay away. How bad? He asked. I didn't give them anything. Lena was shaking from adrenaline. But they're going to paint me as complicit anyway. We'll deal with it. He guided her to the waiting car, security flanking them. You did exactly right. Back at the estate, reality set in. The indictment was public now. News coverage showed Dominic's photo alongside allegations of organized crime. Reporters camped outside the gates. Lena's former teaching colleagues were being contacted for comments. Her old life was being dissected and destroyed in real time. I'm toxic, she said that evening, scrolling through news articles on her phone. Every school I've worked at, every reference I had, it's all tainted now. I'm sorry. Dominic sat beside her on the sofa. This is exactly what I wanted to prevent. Well, prevention failed. Now we deal with consequences. Margaret appeared with dinner neither of them wanted. The press will move on eventually, they always do. Not before they've thoroughly ruined my reputation. Lena set down her phone. I'll never teach again. No school will hire someone associated with a federal racketeering case. Then you do something else, Dominic said quietly. Business school, remember? You were planning to apply. That was before all this. So what? You're still brilliant, still capable. He took her hand. Don't let them take your future because of my past. Lena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning. The investigation, the testimony, the constant stress, it was all too much. I need to check on Maya, she said, escaping to the nursery. Their daughter was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her entire world was imploding around her. Lena sat in the rocking chair watching Maya's chest rise and fall and tried to find strength she wasn't sure she possessed. The trial date was set for 6 months out. 6 months of legal preparation, media scrutiny, and living under investigation. 6 months of watching Dominic's legitimate businesses suffer as partners pulled out, investors got nervous, employees jumped ship. The empire he'd been trying to build was collapsing in slow motion. We could still run, Dominic said one night, 3 months into the pretrial proceedings. I have everything ready. We could be in Argentina in 12 hours. Lena looked up from the legal documents she'd been reviewing. I thought we agreed to fight. That was before I watched this destroy you. He gestured at the papers spread across their dining room table. You haven't slept properly in weeks. You've lost weight. You barely smile anymore. I'm managing. You're drowning. Dominic sat beside her. And I'm the anchor pulling you under. Don't be dramatic. I'm being realistic. He turned her face toward him gently. Lena, I love you, and I can't keep watching this break you. The words stopped her heart. In all these months, through everything, he'd never said those words. You love me? She whispered. Of course I love you. I've loved you since that parking garage when you looked at me with absolute horror and I realized I'd just destroyed the best thing in my life. His thumb brushed across her cheek. I've been trying to earn you back ever since. Tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. You can't just say that now. When should I say it? When I'm in prison? When it's too late? Dominic pulled her into his arms. I should have said it months ago. Should have told you every day that you're the reason I'm trying to change. Lena clung to him, years of fear and stress and complicated feelings pouring out in broken sobs. He held her through it, solid and steady. The man she'd somehow fallen for despite every reason not to. "I love you too," she finally managed, "and I hate that I do because it makes everything harder." "Yeah." His laugh was watery. "Love is inconvenient like that." They stayed wrapped together until Maya's crying summoned them both to the nursery. They took care of their daughter and practiced tandem, both of them exhausted but functioning. "We're going to get through this," Lena said as they put Maya back down. "Together?" "Together." She took his hand. "No running. We fight, and whatever happens, we face it as a family." There was that word again, but this time it didn't feel complicated or forced. It felt true. The months until trial crawled by with agonizing slowness. Patricia and her team built their defense, found weaknesses in witness testimony, challenged evidence. But the prosecution was relentless, adding charges, bringing in new witnesses, building a case that looked increasingly damning. "They're offering a plea deal," Patricia announced 3 weeks before trial. 20 years reduced to 12 with good behavior. You'd be out while Maya's still in high school. Dominic looked at Lena. "What do you think?" "I think 12 years is a lifetime." She turned to Patricia. "What happens if we go to trial and lose?" "He's looking at 40 years minimum, multiple charges, consecutive sentences." 40 years. Maya would be middle-aged before he got out. "But if we win," Lena pressed, "if we win, he walks away clean." All charges dropped. 50-50 odds, a coin flip between freedom and lifetime imprisonment. "We go to trial," Dominic said firmly. Patricia nodded. "Then we better make damn sure we win." The final 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Witness interviews, strategy sessions, mock trials where they practiced every scenario. Lena sat through it all, learning the legal system's intricacies, understanding just how much was at stake. The night before trial, she found Dominic in Maya's nursery. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. "Memorizing her face." He looked up from where he sat watching their daughter. "In case tomorrow goes badly." Lena joined him, both of them committing this moment to memory. Maya at 8 months old, healthy and perfect and completely innocent. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Lena said quietly, "she'll know you fought for her. For us. Will that be enough?" "It'll have to be." They sat in the nursery until dawn, holding each other and their daughter, preparing for a trial that would determine everything. The future had never felt more uncertain, but for the first time since that parking garage, Lena felt like they were facing it honestly. No more illusions, no more hiding. Just two people who loved each other and their child, fighting with everything they had against impossible odds. Win or lose, they'd do it together. That had to count for something. The federal courthouse felt like a cathedral built to intimidate. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, the weight of justice carved into every column and cornice. Lena sat behind the defense table, Maya sleeping in a carrier at her feet, and tried to control her breathing as the jury filed in. 12 strangers who would decide their future. Dominic sat beside Patricia, his expression calm in a way Lena had learned meant he was anything but. His hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. 3 hours of evidence presentation, witness lists, financial records that painted Dominic as exactly what he'd been. A crime lord who'd spent years building an empire on illegal operations. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Davidson, spoke with absolute certainty. "The evidence will show that Dominic Moretti knowingly and willfully engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity, that he laundered money through legitimate businesses, that he orchestrated illegal gambling operations, smuggling rings, and protection rackets across Chicago, and that he did all of this while presenting a respectable face to the community." Lena watched the jury's faces. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked convinced. When Patricia stood for the defense's opening, the courtroom went quiet. "Everything the prosecution just told you is partially true," she began, and Lena's heart stopped. Dominic Moretti did inherit a criminal organization. He did run operations that violated federal law. But here's what they won't tell you. For the past 5 years, he's been systematically dismantling that empire, transitioning to legitimate businesses, reducing illegal activity by over 60%, trying to become something better than what his father left him. Patricia pulled up financial records on the courtroom monitors. You'll see legitimate restaurant chains, real estate holdings, import companies that comply with every regulation. You'll see a man who enrolled in business school to learn how to run legal operations. You'll see documented evidence of transition, not expansion. She turned to face the jury directly. The prosecution wants you to judge my client based on who he was. I'm asking you to consider who he's becoming, because transformation isn't a crime. Trying to change isn't illegal, and a man shouldn't spend his life in prison for trying to climb out of a hole his father dug. It was a gamble. Admitting guilt to some charges while arguing mitigation. But watching the jury, Lena saw a few faces shift from certain to considering. Maybe they had a chance after all. The trial stretched across 3 brutal weeks. Prosecution witnesses, former employees, rival gang members, people who'd taken deals to testify, painted vivid pictures of Dominic's criminal activities. Each one felt like a nail in their coffin, but Patricia was relentless in cross-examination. Mr. Castellano, you're testifying in exchange for what exactly? Reduced sentence, 5 years instead of 20. And you were arrested for what crime? Embezzlement. I stole from Mr. Moretti's operations. So you're a proven thief and liar, and we're supposed to believe your testimony about my client? Patricia's voice was sharp. How much of what you're saying is true versus what prosecutors told you to say to get your deal? Objection. Davidson stood. Counsel is impugning the witness. Sustained. Ms. Chen, rephrase. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the weakness in the testimony. It went like that for days. Patricia systematically dismantled credibility, showed inconsistencies, revealed the deals and motivations behind each witness. The prosecution's case started looking less like ironclad evidence and more like a house of cards built on unreliable testimony. Then came the financial records. Davidson spent 2 days walking forensic accountants through money trails, showing how cash from illegal operations moved through Dominic's legitimate businesses. It was damning, technical, and impossible to dismiss. This exhibit shows $3 million flowing from unlicensed gambling operations into Moretti Restaurant Group accounts, Davidson explained, laundered through what appeared to be legitimate sales. The numbers didn't lie. The pattern was clear. Patricia's counter was brilliant. She brought in her own forensic accountant who showed the same records from a different angle. Yes, cash came into these accounts. But look at what happened next. It was reported to the IRS, taxes were paid, everything was documented. If Mr. Moretti was trying to hide illegal proceeds, why would he pay taxes on them? Because paying taxes creates the appearance of legitimacy, Davidson started. Or because he was actually trying to transition illegal operations into legal ones, converting cash businesses into legitimate revenue streams. Patricia pulled up more records. You can see the pattern over 5 years. Illegal revenue decreasing annually, legitimate revenue increasing. This isn't money laundering, it's business transformation. The jury looked confused now, which was better than convinced of guilt. Halfway through week 2, the prosecution called their star witness, Vincent Calabrese. Lena's blood ran cold as Vincent took the stand. The man who'd threatened her and Maya, now testifying against Dominic in exchange for immunity. Mr. Calabrese, how long have you known the defendant? About 15 years. We came up in the same world. And can you describe Mr. Moretti's role in Chicago's organized crime? He runs the North Side, controls gambling, smuggling, protection. His father built it, Dominic expanded it. Davidson walked Vincent through years of criminal activity, each answer more damaging than the last. Dominic's face remained impassive, but Lena could feel the tension radiating from him. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. Mr. Calabrese, you're testifying under an immunity agreement, correct? Yes. An immunity agreement for what crimes specifically? Vincent shifted uncomfortably. Similar charges, racketeering, money laundering. So you did everything you're accusing my client of doing. I never said I was innocent. No, you just said whatever prosecutors told you to say to avoid prison. Patricia moved closer. Isn't it true that you and Mr. Moretti were business partners until recently? We had some joint ventures. Joint ventures that you sabotaged when you felt he was transitioning away from illegal operations too quickly. Objection, speculation. I'll rephrase. Mr. Calabrese, did you or did you not send armed men to threaten Mrs. Carter and Mr. Moretti's infant daughter? Vincent's face flushed. That's not, I never, yes or no? Did you threaten a woman and a baby to pressure my client? Davidson was on his feet. Your Honor, this is outside the scope. It goes to witness credibility, Patricia countered. If Mr. Calabrese is willing to threaten an infant, he's willing to lie under oath. The judge considered. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Calabrese. Vincent glared at Patricia. I sent a message. That's how business works. A message involving a photograph of a newborn baby and explicit threats. And now you're testifying against the father of that child in exchange for immunity. The jury should understand your motivations aren't exactly pure. The cross-examination continued for hours. By the end, Vincent looked less like a credible witness and more like a criminal cutting any deal necessary to save himself. But the prosecution still had the financial records, still had the pattern of illegal activity. As week 3 began, Patricia made a risky decision. The defense calls Dominic Moretti. Lena's heart stopped. They'd debated this for weeks. Putting Dominic on the stand meant exposing him to Davidson's cross-examination, but it also meant letting the jury hear directly from him. Dominic took the oath, settled into the witness chair, and met Patricia's eyes with quiet resolve. Mr. Moretti, did you inherit a criminal organization from your father? Yes. Did you run illegal operations for several years? Yes. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Lena held her breath. And why are you admitting this? Dominic looked at the jury. Because it's true. My father built an empire on violence and illegal activity. When he died, I was 16 years old. I had 2 choices. Let everything collapse, which would have gotten people killed, or take over and try to manage it. I chose management. What happened next? I spent years learning the business. And the more I learned, the more I hated it. His voice was steady. The violence, the fear, the constant threat. I watched good people get hurt because of decisions my father made decades ago, and I decided I wanted different. Patricia pulled up financial records. Can you explain these documents? That's my transition plan. 5 years ago, I started moving operations toward legitimate businesses, reducing illegal activity, investing in legal enterprises. It's not fast. You can't dismantle a criminal empire overnight without people getting killed. But every year there's less illegal revenue and more legitimate income. Why not just walk away completely? Because I'm responsible for about 200 families. People who work in my restaurants, my import companies, my real estate holdings. If I just abandoned everything, they'd lose their livelihoods. And the violent people who'd fill the power vacuum would make my father look merciful. Patricia walked him through years of business decisions. The partnership with Vincent that reduced violence. The restaurant expansion that created legitimate jobs. The enrollment in business school. Mr. Moretti, why should this jury believe you're actually changing? Dominic's eyes found Lena in the gallery. Because I have a daughter, and I want her to inherit businesses, not blood feuds. I want her to know her father as someone who built things, not destroyed them. Then Davidson stood for cross-examination, and the real battle began. Mr. Moretti, you testified that you reduced illegal activity, but you didn't eliminate it, did you? Not yet, no. So you continued to break federal law while claiming to transition. I continued to manage operations that were illegal while working to replace them with legal alternatives. That's a convenient distinction. Davidson pulled up different records. These show illegal gambling revenue from just 8 months ago. Yes. Operations I was in the process of shutting down. Process. That's a useful word, isn't it? You can claim to be in process indefinitely while continuing to profit from crime. If I shut everything down at once, 20 competitors would rush in. More violence, more victims. I'm doing this strategically to minimize harm. Davidson spent 3 hours attacking every answer, every justification. But Dominic never wavered, never lost his composure. He admitted his crimes while explaining his choices, acknowledged his guilt while demonstrating his effort to change. By the end of the cross-examination, the jury looked torn, which was exactly where Patricia wanted them. Closing arguments came on day 19. Davidson painted Dominic as a criminal who'd gotten caught and was now claiming reformation to avoid consequences. Don't be fooled by talk of transition and change. The evidence shows systematic illegal activity continuing right up until his arrest. A criminal doesn't stop being a criminal just because he enrolls in business school. Patricia's closing was passionate. My client isn't claiming to be innocent. He's claiming to be trying. And there's a difference between a man actively committing crimes and a man working to undo his father's legacy. Yes, he's broken laws. Yes, he should face consequences. But 40 years in prison for trying to change? That's not justice. That's vengeance. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days where Lena barely ate or slept. 3 days of watching Dominic try to stay strong while clearly terrified. 3 days of holding Maya and wondering if this was their last time together as a family. On the afternoon of day 3, the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom packed within minutes. Lena sat behind Dominic, close enough to touch his shoulder. Patricia arranged her papers with hands that trembled slightly. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Lena stopped breathing. Guilty. The word hit like a physical blow. Dominic's shoulders tensed, but he didn't move. On the charge of money laundering? Guilty. Lena's vision blurred. This was it. They were losing. On the charge of conspiracy? The forewoman hesitated. Not guilty. Wait, what? The judge continued through the list of charges. The jury had split the verdict, finding Dominic guilty of past crimes but not guilty of ongoing conspiracy, essentially agreeing that he'd committed crimes but was genuinely trying to stop. Given the mixed verdict, I'm setting sentencing for 30 days from now, the judge announced. Mr. Moretti will remain free on bail pending that hearing. Patricia immediately requested a sidebar. Lena watched them argue with the judge, too far away to hear the details. When they returned, Patricia looked cautiously optimistic. What happened? Lena asked as soon as they had privacy. Mixed verdict is good, Patricia explained. It means the jury believed his reformation was real. That gives us leverage for sentencing. Instead of 40 years, we're looking at maybe 10 to 15. That's still a decade, Lena said. It's a lifetime less than it could have been. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. And we're not done fighting. Sentencing hearings allow character witnesses, mitigation arguments. We can still reduce this. The 30 days until sentencing were surreal. Dominic was guilty but free, facing prison, but not yet. They existed in a strange limbo, trying to prepare for separation while clinging to every moment together. Lena spent hours preparing her victim impact statement, except she wasn't a victim. She was a partner, a co-parent, someone whose life was entangled with his. I don't know what to say, she confessed one evening. How do I explain us to a judge? Tell the truth, Dominic said, whatever that is. The truth was complicated. The truth was she'd fallen in love with a criminal who was trying to change, that she'd made choices that implicated her too, that their daughter deserved a father, flawed as he was. The sentencing hearing was smaller than the trial, but no less intense. The prosecution recommended 15 years. The defense argued for 5, with credit for time served and rehabilitation. The judge listened impassively to both sides. Then it was time for character witnesses. Margaret testified about Dominic's transformation, the legitimate businesses he'd built. Former employees spoke about the jobs he'd created, the families he'd supported. Even Vincent's former partner, who had no immunity deal, testified that Dominic had prevented violence more often than he'd caused it. Finally, the judge called Lena. She stood on shaking legs, approached the witness stand, and swore to tell the truth. Ms. Carter, you're here voluntarily? Yes, Your Honor. Tell me about your relationship with the defendant. Lena took a breath. I met Dominic 18 months ago. I thought he was a businessman. I fell in love with who I thought he was. Then I discovered the truth. How did that discovery occur? I witnessed him order someone's execution. I was pregnant, and I ran. I spent 7 months hiding before he found me. The judge's expression sharpened. He found you? He'd been protecting me the entire time. I thought I was free, but he'd stationed security around me, paid my bills anonymously, made sure I was safe. Lena met the judge's eyes. I could have hated him for that. Part of me did. But when my daughter was born prematurely and I was vulnerable, he gave me a choice. Come back to Chicago where he could protect us properly, or refuse and try to survive alone. You chose to return. I chose survival, but I stayed for different reasons. Lena's voice steadied. I stayed because I watched him try to change. I reviewed his financial records, saw the transition from illegal to legitimate operations. I watched him enroll in business school, partner with former rivals to reduce violence, rebuild his empire into something that could exist in daylight. You're asking for leniency. I'm asking for recognition that change is possible, that a man who inherits darkness at 16 shouldn't be condemned forever for trying to find light. Lena's throat tightened. Our daughter is 8 months old. She deserves to know her father, and he deserves the chance to become the man he's trying to be. The judge was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Ms. Carter. You may step down. Dominic spoke last, his statement brief and direct. Your Honor, I'm guilty of everything the jury convicted me of. I don't deny my crimes or try to minimize them, but I'm trying to change. And I'm asking for the opportunity to continue that transformation outside of prison, where I can support my daughter and complete the legitimate transition I started. The judge took a recess to consider, 2 hours that felt like years. When they reconvened, Lena held her breath. Mr. Moretti, you've been convicted of serious federal crimes. Crimes that typically carry substantial prison sentences. The prosecution is recommending 15 years. The defense is requesting 5. Dominic stood motionless. However, I've reviewed the evidence of your rehabilitation efforts. The financial records showing systematic transition toward legitimate business. The testimony of employees whose lives improved under your management. And most importantly, the jury's mixed verdict suggesting they believed your reformation was genuine. The judge paused. I'm sentencing you to 8 years in federal prison, with credit for time served and possibility of parole after 5 years if you maintain good behavior and continue demonstrating rehabilitation. 8 years. Not the 40 they'd feared, not the 5 they'd hoped for. Somewhere in between. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm recommending you be placed in a minimum security facility that allows family visitation. Your daughter should know her father, even under these circumstances. Dominic's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. Earn this leniency by continuing the transformation you started. Prove that the court's faith in your rehabilitation wasn't misplaced. As the bailiff led Dominic away to begin processing, he looked back at Lena one last time. She tried to smile, tried to show strength. They'd survived. Not unscathed, but intact. 8 years wasn't forever. The first year was the hardest. Learning to parent alone, to manage the estate's operations, to navigate a world without Dominic's daily presence. But he'd been right about the minimum security facility. Visitation was every weekend, video calls twice a week. Maya got to know her father through glass and screens, laughing at his silly faces, reaching for him through barriers. Lena enrolled in the business school program Dominic had started, used his business contacts to continue the legitimate transition, closing the last illegal operations and replacing them with legal ventures. She was good at it, discovering a talent for strategy she'd never known she possessed. Patricia became an unlikely friend, guiding Lena through the legal complexities of running Dominic's empire. Margaret remained the estate's steady presence, helping with Maya and providing the grandmother figure neither of them had. The media attention faded. New scandals emerged to capture public interest. Gradually, Lena stopped being the crime boss's girlfriend and became just another single mother navigating life's complexities. Except she wasn't single. She was waiting. Dominic thrived in prison in ways that surprised everyone. He finished his MBA through correspondence courses, started teaching business classes to other inmates, became a model prisoner. His parole hearing started after year 5. The first one was denied. Too soon, the board said, but they acknowledged his rehabilitation efforts. The second hearing, 6 months later, went differently. Lena testified again, this time about the businesses they'd built, the legitimate empire that now employed over 1,000 people. About Maya, now 6 years old, who wrote letters to her daddy and counted days until he came home. Mr. Moretti has demonstrated exceptional rehabilitation, the parole board chairman said. His business program has helped dozens of inmates prepare for legitimate employment post-release. He's maintained perfect conduct for 5.5 years, and the criminal organization he once ran has been completely transformed into legal operations. They granted parole effective in 30 days. Lena cried in the parking lot afterward, Maya confused by her mother's tears. Happy crying, baby, Lena explained. Daddy's coming home. The day of Dominic's release, Lena stood outside the prison gates with Maya holding her hand. 6 years old now, dark curls like her father, her mother's stubborn determination. Will I recognize him? Maya asked nervously. You've been visiting him every month. Of course you'll recognize him. But he's never hugged me without glass between us. Lena's heart broke a little. That changes today. The gates opened. Dominic walked out carrying a small bag of possessions, wearing civilian clothes for the first time in over 5 years. He looked older, leaner, but his eyes found them immediately. Maya ran. She'd been coached not to, reminded to walk calmly, but she ran anyway. Dominic dropped his bag and caught her, lifting her into his arms for the first time without barriers. Hi, Butterfly, he whispered into her hair. Hi, Daddy. You're really real. I'm really real. Lena approached more slowly, drinking in the sight of them together. Her family, finally whole. Dominic met her eyes over Maya's head. Hi. Hi yourself. She touched his face, feeling actual skin instead of glass. Welcome home. The drive back to Lake Forest was surreal. Maya chattered nonstop, showing Dominic drawings she'd made, telling him about school and friends and everything he'd missed. He listened with rapt attention, his hand never leaving Lena's. The estate looked the same, but felt different with him there. Margaret had prepared his favorite meal. The staff, people who'd waited years for his return, welcomed him warmly. After dinner, after Maya was finally asleep, Lena and Dominic stood in the living room that had witnessed so many difficult conversations. So, he said, what now? Now we figure out the rest of our lives. Lena moved into his arms, finally able to hold him without time limits or supervision. You've got parole conditions to follow, businesses to help run, a daughter to raise properly. Sounds complicated. It will be. She looked up at him. But we've survived worse. We have. Dominic kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For waiting, for building this, for giving me something worth coming home to. You built it too, from inside prison, through phone calls and letters and sheer determination. Lena pulled back slightly. We're partners now. Actually, officially partners. I had Patricia draw up papers making me co-owner of the businesses. Equal say, equal responsibility. Dominic's smile was genuine. When did you do that? 3 years ago. Figured if I was running your empire, I should have official authority. Our empire, he corrected, and I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood in comfortable silence, years of struggle and separation finally behind them. I have something for you, Dominic said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Lena's breath caught. Dominic, let me do this properly. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring. I bought this 6 years ago with money I earned teaching classes in prison. It's not fancy, but it's completely legitimate. No blood money, no illegal proceeds, just honest work. It's perfect. Lena Carter, you've waited for me when you had every reason to leave. You've built a life for our daughter, transformed my businesses, and somehow still found it in yourself to love me. Will you marry me? She'd known this was coming, had anticipated it for years. But hearing the actual question still made her heart race. Yes, she said, but on one condition. Name it. We do this right. Legal wedding, legitimate life, no more secrets or shadows. We build something Maya can be proud of. Deal. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger. Though technically that's 3 conditions. I'm negotiating up. Lena laughed, then kissed him. Get used to it. They married 6 months later in the estate's garden. Maya as flower girl, Margaret crying happy tears. It was small, intimate, exactly what they needed. No press, no spectacle, just family and the few friends who'd stood by them through everything. Patricia officiated, her legal expertise extending to minister credentials. Do you, Dominic Moretti, take Lena Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Lena Carter, take Dominic Moretti to be your lawfully wedded husband? Lena looked at the man she'd run from, returned to, fought beside. The father of her child, the partner in her businesses, the person who'd transformed himself from what he'd inherited into what he'd chosen to become. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, and several federal agencies who need this to be extremely legal, I pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was long and earned and worth every difficult moment that had led to it. Maya cheered. Finally, I've been waiting forever. You're 6, Lena laughed. That's forever in kid years. The reception was relaxed, full of laughter and hope. Dominic's parole officer even stopped by briefly to verify he was following conditions, then stayed for cake because Margaret's baking was legendary. As evening fell and guests departed, Lena found Dominic watching Maya play with the flower petals in the garden. What are you thinking? She asked. That I'm the luckiest man alive. He pulled her close. I thought that parking garage was the end. Turned out it was just the beginning. Of what? Everything that matters. He gestured at Maya, at the estate, at the life they'd built from ruins. I spent so many years thinking I had to be what my father was. Turns out I could be something better. You're doing it, Lena said softly. Every day, you're choosing better. We're doing it, he corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Maya ran up, grass stains on her flower girl dress, completely happy. Can we have cake for breakfast tomorrow? Absolutely not, Lena said. Maybe a small piece, Dominic countered. You've been home 6 months, and you're already undermining my parenting. I've got years of being the fun parent to make up for. They argued playfully while Maya giggled, the picture of a normal family, which, despite everything, they somehow were. That night, after Maya was asleep and the house was quiet, Lena stood in the nursery that had witnessed so many difficult moments. The room where she'd made impossible decisions, where Dominic had held their daughter for the first time, where they'd both confronted what it meant to be parents in an imperfect world. Dominic found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind. Second thoughts? He asked. Never. She leaned into him, just remembering how far we've come. And where we're going? Wherever it is, we're going together. Years later, when Maya was older and started asking harder questions, they told her the truth, age-appropriately at first, then more completely as she matured. They didn't hide what Dominic had been or what they'd survived. And Maya, brilliant and fierce like both her parents, understood something important. People weren't just their worst choices. They were also their best efforts, the sum of who they'd been and who they chose to become. Dominic's businesses continued to thrive, completely legitimate now. The last questionable operation had closed during his 4th year in prison, replaced by consulting firms and restaurant chains and real estate holdings that operated in full daylight. Lena completed her MBA, then a doctorate in business ethics. She taught at Northwestern, wrote papers on corporate transformation, became an expert in helping companies transition from questionable practices to legitimate operations. Together, they built something neither could have created alone. On Maya's 18th birthday, they sat her down in that same living room where so many critical conversations had happened. We have something for you, Dominic said, handing her a leather portfolio. Inside were documents establishing a foundation in her name, funded by the estate, dedicated to helping children of incarcerated parents maintain family connections and build stable futures. This is everything we learned, Lena explained, about second chances, about transformation, about how family can survive impossible circumstances. We want to help other families find their way through. Maya looked at the documents, then at her parents. This is perfect, but I have a condition. Of course you do, Dominic smiled. You're your mother's daughter. I want to run it, after college. Make this my career. Lena and Dominic exchanged glances. They'd hoped she'd choose business, maybe law, something prestigious and stable. But helping others who'd survived what they had? That was better. Yes, Lena said. Absolutely yes. Maya grinned. Good, because I already wrote my college admissions essay about it. That was their daughter. Always 3 steps ahead, planning futures while others worried about presents. She inherited the best of both of them. Years continued to pass. Dominic and Lena grew older together, navigating life's normal complications. Teenagers, college applications, business challenges that were blessedly legal and boring. They argued about finances and parenting strategies and whether to expand the foundation's reach. Normal couple things. On their 15th wedding anniversary, They returned to the estate's orchard where they'd first started negotiating their partnership. Remember when you demanded separate finances and a public identity? Dominic asked. Remember when you thought you could control everything through surveillance and protection? Lena countered. We were both idiots. Terrified idiots, she corrected. But we figured it out. They had, through trial and compromise and the slow building of trust that came from choosing each other every single day. Do you ever regret it? Dominic asked quietly. The running, the hiding, all those months alone? Lena considered the question seriously. Sometimes I regret the fear, the panic. But the running itself? That gave me time to figure out who I was outside of us. Made me stronger. Strong enough to stay when you could have left. Strong enough to demand better. To negotiate partnership instead of accepting protection. She took his hand. We built something real, Dominic. Not perfect, but real. That matters more than the easy path would have. He pulled her close, and they stood in the orchard as the sun set, painting everything gold. 16 years since that parking garage. 16 years of fighting and building and transforming darkness into something that could survive in light. Not a fairy tale. Not a romance for the ages. Just two imperfect people who'd made terrible choices and fought like hell to create something worth keeping. Their daughter was launching a foundation to help others survive what they had. Their businesses employed thousands in legitimate operations. Their marriage had survived prison and trials and every reason to fail. And on a warm autumn evening in the orchard, where they'd negotiated their first fragile truce, Lena Carter Moretti realized something important. She'd never been trapped in a cage. She'd been building a home. One difficult choice at a time, one compromise at a time, one act of faith at a time. And the home they'd built together was strong enough to last. I love you, she said. I love you too, Dominic replied. Thank you for giving me the chance to earn that. Thank you for becoming someone worth it. Behind them, the house glowed with lights. Inside, Margaret was preparing dinner. Maya would be home from college soon, full of stories and plans. Their family, complicated and hard-won and absolutely real. Lena had thought she knew what she wanted 16 years ago. A simple life, a good man, a future free from complications. Instead, she'd gotten a criminal trying to become better, impossible choices, and a future built from the ruins of everything she'd thought she understood. And somehow, that had been exactly what she needed. Not the easy path, the real one, the one that led home.